Hey everyone, thanks for tuning in to the Business Owner Spotlight. I'm excited to get into this one. So why don't we start with who are you? What do you do and how long you been doing it?
Hi everyone. My name is Shruthi Kumar. I'm a junior currently at Harvard College. I was born and raised and grew up in Omaha, Nebraska, and that's where I actually started my company called GoYogi. I started it in the summer after my sophomore year of high school, and I attended Marian High School. So I basically wanted to, I saw the omnipresence of like stress, anxiety, and depression that were in the hallways of high schools, not just mine, but high schools across the United States, and had a lot of personal experiences as well, and people I knew that were struggling with mental health at such a young age. Did some research and learned that adolescence is the peak time that mental health issues arise for people. And so in my life, I had been learning yoga and meditation all throughout my childhood and growing up. And so the minute I came in contact with, say, anxiety or stress, I naturally turned towards meditation and mindfulness to help me with that, and also used it as a tool to learn more about myself, what I'm interested in, what my strengths are, what my weaknesses are, and how I can become successful or grow in my personal life. And so I wanted to share meditation as a tool for students to use in their academic growth, athletic performances, artists and things like that. All the fields of study that students are interested in, being able to use meditation as a tool for introspection and for mental health. And so that's kind of when I founded GoYogi. It's a mindfulness and meditation based nonprofit. We work on building mental health infrastructure in schools, educational institutions, and workplaces. Essentially, we come in, we learn kind of how your students are, how your employees are, what the well-being and workplace culture is like, and then we provide customized resources to help your students and to help your employees. And so that's the kind of service we run. We are completely student-led, which is really awesome. That also makes us close to the problem and close to the solution. And so college students, high school students from across the United States and internationally are on our team and contribute to the work that we do. So yeah, really excited to continue the conversation on this.
That is awesome. When you think about success in your life and what you've seen, who's the first person that comes to mind?
Yeah, so I think very personally, it would probably be my mom, just because she, in any situation she is in, finds a way to achieve happiness. And obviously, if you're thinking business owners, whether it be in her work life or in her personal life, ran many businesses, worked with many people in many different forms. But at the end of the day, like always prioritized her happiness. And I think like in a broader like business philosophy sense, like success to me is defined as whoever in the world is able to make money on something that they're happy doing is my definition of success. So like what you would be doing, whether it was paying you or not, is like what I would determine as a successful career. And so that's what I hope to do. This is like working on GoYogi is what makes me happy, and like what brings me the most joy is like seeing other students passionately advocating for mental health, to see educational institutions, workplaces take an initiative to care about their employees' well-being and mental health. And so, eventually making this business something much larger is my goal and what I would define as success for myself.
That's awesome. How large are you looking to grow with it?
I mean, like the sky's the limit, in my opinion. We've been working with schools in India and in the US. And so we've worked with a multitude of contexts. And what we're now realizing is that mental health is so universal that like, even if you go to the most remote parts of, say, India or Latin America, people are struggling with the same experiences of depression, of anxiety and stress. And so like the need definitely exists everywhere and kind of at the global scale. And so, ideally, I would like to grow to make this be a part of our culture, of our institutions, of our systems. And, that might also involve government partnerships in the future through policy, through legislation, which we've done a little bit work with in Nebraska, but would love to see that on a global scale through global health policies as well.
Awesome.
Yeah.
looking at when you started the business and how long it's been going, COVID seems to have been smack dab in the middle of that.
Yeah.
Any changes that were necessary as that was coming through?
Yeah, so yeah, we started in 2018 and obviously like went through the pandemic with our services. And given that we're very education based and very mental health based, and also coming out of the pandemic, I think everyone realized the importance of mental health and what it means to be alone, how to take time to sit in solitude or sit in meditation, and how that can be beneficial. So like we were forced to do it in the pandemic, but I think we also learned from that. And so during the pandemic, I think like a lot of the organization, or a lot of the schools that we had been working with in 2019, 2020, going into the pandemic, we kind of basically like they would either transition to virtual education or they wouldn't, right? So it depends on the schools that we worked with. Some of them were low income schools. And so some schools had the funding and the ability to have their students, use iPads, laptops to continue their education on Zoom. Other schools didn't have those resources and, students' education was largely on pause. And so that's when we saw the a rise of the education gap during COVID, and like who had access to broadband internet and who didn't, and what that meant for how much education you were getting. And so those were like the large scale challenges that we saw in the field and like that ultimately affected us. I think what we did was we transitioned a lot of our communications to different platforms, and the schools that were able to remain connected with us, we were able to share those resources personally to students through messengers or WhatsApp platforms, especially for international students, so that they were able to continue to use the audio lessons and the resources that we have through the course of the pandemic. And actually we saw a lot of students really use those resources more during the pandemic when those I think like anxiety and depression increased about 25% just after the pandemic globally. And so we also saw a similar increase in demand and resources following the pandemic, which was something like obviously hard to think about in 2018 or 2019, but following the pandemic, we've seen a lot of demand for educational institutions and from workplaces that are prioritizing mental health now.
Yeah, I can't think of a bigger challenge and opportunity hitting at the same time than
Exactly.
in-school mental health through the pandemic. It's incredible what you've been able to do with it then.
Yeah, it's definitely been challenging. Not something I love to see, that like, suicide rates are spiking, anxiety is going up. But I think like the COVID honestly was kind of like a wake up call in terms of, our mental health and our well-being. And I'm really happy to see that a lot of institutions and policy makers are taking this on as more of a priority and seeing it for what it is. I think in the past, before the pandemic, mental health was largely on the back burner when it comes to a lot of different priorities that businesses have, a lot of different priorities that educational systems have. Mental health often took like a backstage role. But I think like after the pandemic, institutions, businesses, everyone alike are now realizing it's hard to do anything if your mental health is not in check, if you're not, in the right headspace. And so we've seen like there's, if you want to get real economic, like productivity growth and like, just the well-being of your employees and of your students matters a lot for how much they're able to focus, how much buy-in they have to the work that they're doing, and what they hope to see. So I kind of took COVID as a wake-up call in terms of like, okay, like I knew mental health was important before when I started this in my sophomore year of high school, but after the pandemic, now I'm seeing that it's all the more important and, even more necessary that I, continue working on what I am and also empower other, organizations and communities and people that are working on the same thing. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
So through that time frame, what's the biggest learning that you've had as a business owner or operator?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing, at least for us being a student-led team, is that there is a lot of moving parts to operating this. And I think also remote work is what I've learned a lot from. I think like before the pandemic, before all of these kind of things happened, there was like a very definite way of conducting business, whether it be like having an office space or, this very hierarchical, like, system of roles and employees, or it be like in-person meetings that would happen on a weekly basis. And so this like remote work situation is one that like one is a challenge, but also something that we've navigated well, and that like we've adapted to make it work well for our team. Our team is like has like at one time not met in person yet. And so we have like students from, all the way West Coast to East Coast in India, different time zones. And so we operate completely remotely. And that's a new framework for a lot of people, especially following the pandemic. And so I think the biggest learning I've had is like how to manage and stay connected with and bond with the people that are on your team to, make them feel a sense of this mission and this goal, and feel like a team when we can't necessarily be there in person. And I think that's like, something people can relate to coming out of the pandemic more broadly, is like, how do we maintain social connections? How do we maintain face-to-face connections and human interaction? Within a business, I think that's incredibly important for the team to know, love, and work with each other well. And so fostering that, developing that, and making that grow has been a really fun learning experience, but also one that I foresee all businesses moving towards in the future, is this sort of remote work environment. Even very, very large companies as well, making that transition. So I think it's like maintaining our mental health, self-care, and self-love for one another and for each other that we want to do in a virtual setting as well.
Absolutely. With all the demographic changes that are happening through the pandemic and all that, you
Mhm.
really were able to see which companies are able to pivot to understand what actually matters that needs to stay the same, and what can we change about how we do things in order to accomplish the mission we're after, right? It's not always that in-person meeting that matters. It's the information that gets shared that's useful.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. So as you look over the next 5 years of where you're going with this, where are you going to be 5 years from now? What does the business look like?
Yeah. I think ideally I want it to kind of be set up in a way that is an autonomous organization and can kind of run on its own at this point. Like we have a lot of people very hands-on with the stuff that we're doing, and we've built up a model that works really well in the schools that we're working with. And so 5 years from now, I'd love to see that model be scaled and replicated in schools across the country. I would like to see it done through policy. I think that's the most effective way to make large scale change, and for schools to invest in something like this for their students that is more long term. The services we do are very personalized, and that's something that is hard for a lot of other companies to replicate, is the one-on-one time and attention that we give to each school's population. What kind of students are coming into your school? What are their home backgrounds? What are they coming into school with on their minds? We want to know and get into the weeds of all of that in order to best shape the well-being of that school and create a culture in that school that is around mental health and wellness. And so the time it takes to do that customized and personalized kind of approach is one that, I hope to be able to scale to a place where, other employees and a lot of other people that will be able to train are also able to do the way we're doing now. And the other piece being, we're actually starting a new kind of field of work within GoYogi, being on the innovation side. So we currently have an app that has all of our audio lessons and mindfulness meditation lessons that we've created. But we're actually working on the next version of this app to become more personalized to every individual. So not just in schools or workplaces as a group, but every individual can also use kind of their own health data and environments to help provide personalized and customized resources. And so hopefully that app taking off is also something that I would love to see within the next couple of years. But yeah, I think like just having more people on board carrying this mission forward. We're currently really working on our India partnerships at the moment. There's a lot, and meditation is something that originates in South Asia. And so I think it is something that we're hoping to see flourish there as well. But really just making this a global effort and growing in the number of people that we have involved, the number of schools that we have involved, and having the model be able to self-replicate and self-sustain on its own. I think that's my goal.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
What do you see as the number one challenge to accomplishing that?
I think at this moment, it's probably bandwidth of the people that I have. So given that we're all students, it is hard to have like full-time employees on board. I myself am not like I'm a full-time student, but also working on this business. And so I think like having the funding to be able to have full-time employees is something that I would love to see. We've like built up enough infrastructure now to the point at which someone could be doing this full-time, and we are as students doing it full-time, but to be able to employ kind of more people to take on this effort where they are, set up chapters in different areas, set up different directorships and organizations that are kind of branching off from this mission is something that I'd like to do. And at this point, like, especially with the app, I think funding is the main thing, is like we're working on raising enough revenue and kind of capital to be able to build the software that's needed for the app, for the next version of the app. And so that's where we're at currently. So definitely manpower and money is where we're at.
I feel like that's an answer a lot of businesses give:
Yeah.
manpower and money.
Yeah.
Well, so as you're talking about the people on your team being
Yeah.
all students, how do you see that changing how you're building this business? I mean, I know in the script we talk about employment things. You have a very niche area in which you're looking to hire. I'm interested in how you pick them and what you see being the challenges going forward in that.
Yeah, so I think the one thing like I would like to do is keep kind of the team centered. I think the people in the team is what matters most to the work that we put out. And having it be students. Students are, a unique demographic that a lot of, I think, technology or companies don't always cater very specifically to, especially in the field of mental health. It's often like anyone and anyone who can afford it gets mental health resources, but not those that can't. And so that's who our target audience is the people that maybe don't have money to sign up for, Headspace or Calm or all these other apps. And also in a way that like they don't need to necessarily do it. Their company or their school or their organization will do it for them. So it being a B2B model is very helpful, just because we are able to work with kind of like the people that need to make it happen in their systems and in their institutions for it to grow. I think in terms of the actual people, like students obviously have a high demand for cash and cash flow. And so I'd love to be able to, have part-time students be employed, but also I think taking care of the administrative work is something that a full-time employee could take care of. But keeping kind of our team young and the young energy is something that's important to us, just because there's a lot of groups that have, people that are very much outside of the experience of mental health issues or far removed from high school and what it means and what students are going through, try to work on this issue. And it never quite hits them the same way that I feel like the work we do does, because it comes from students that are experiencing the exact issues that we're solving for. So like we are our own customers. And I think that's what makes our team especially like unique, is that the solutions that we develop and come out with are ones that address the problems that we ourselves have. And so, or we ourselves see, right, in the communities that we're in. And so, yeah, I think in terms of in the future, definitely like being able to employ people that are close to the issue, and that can keep students close to the work that's being done as well.
Awesome. I think you and your whole story are so inspiring. One of the reasons is this next question I find very funny. It's what advice would you have for your 18-year-old self? Now that's designed to be asked to someone who's a little bit farther along. So I'm going to change it. There are a lot of students out there with dreams and visions like you, with objectives and things that they want to see fixed. What advice would you have to them as they're trying to start that path?
Yeah, that's a good question. I would say like, I think when it comes to business or when it comes to entrepreneurship, especially social impact entrepreneurship, it's very hard. The kind of flame that's lighting your fire is one that's created by yourself. And that's true for a lot of business owners, is like, what's keeping you going is your mission and what you hope to see. And so a lot of young people, I think, face this kind of self-doubt, self-criticism, like, maybe I'm not able to do something like this, maybe it's not actually needed. And that's something I questioned several times in the past, like 4 to 5 years, is like, is something like this really necessary when there's like a million other things that exist in the world, right? Like what makes this special? And it's like that those questions that come up, it's like answering those in a way that keeps you moving forward. That's what's most important. And so like when I ask myself, why should a school, take on the GoYogi program? Why should they come to us for our service? There are very clear set of reasons of like why I started this back then and why I'm continuing to work on it. Right there, I think could have been many points where you can stop. And I think that's where a lot of young people end up, is like they're working on something, especially in high school or when they have the time, and then something else, comes up later in life, whether it be like a full-time job or full-time position that might, pay you more and might have more financial security and work security. But building a business, especially starting from a small business, does not have a lot of security. There's not a lot of confidence. There's not a lot of backing when you're first starting off. And so it's actually in that introspection and self-reflection that I was able to build that up for myself and have a kind of strength and confidence in myself, but also in my mission and in my company that allows me to keep going now, but also plan for the next 5 years, right? Because that's also something that, a 5-year plan, I actually think is quite outdated in our current communities, given that we shift from place to place. But I think that 5-year mission or that 5-year goal is something that is very hard to come up with when you're first starting, or when you are your motivator. And so I think my advice would be like, really sit down and think about why you care about this issue, what like your solution is gonna do, and like, is this something that you're willing to believe in yourself for? Because if students are looking for validation from anyone other than themselves, you will only find it in temporary amounts, and you'll only find it for short amounts of time. If you want permanent validation, that has to come from yourself. And so, yeah, I think seeking validation is something young people do a lot. And I think we need to start looking for that within ourselves. And that's kind of the key.
Awesome.
Yeah.
As we bring this to a close, any offers you want put in the newsletter and in the post, any information, how do you want people to reach out to you?
Yeah, so you mean just to learn about our work, you can visit the website, www.go-yogi.org. We actually do have openings for a couple new team members that we're looking for. So if you're interested in the mission and the goal, would love to have you on board. We're looking for public relations people, people that can do kind of finance and technology as well. And so if you're interested in joining the team in any capacity, really, you can email mygoyogi@gmail.com. And then if you're a school or a business who wants to kind of have personalized approach to your mental health and well-being for your students or for your employees, you can hit up that same email and we can start working with you. But yeah, that's pretty much it. We're also on Instagram at go-yogi if you want to give us a follow. But yeah, we're super open and love just meeting new people, getting to know new people, and like talking about the issue, even if you aren't necessarily like wanting to dive right in and, work together. Like, honestly, we love just talking and having conversations. And so, yeah, don't hesitate to reach out through email and we can definitely set something up.
Awesome. Thank you so much for being willing to do this.
Of course.
Best of luck to you guys as you move forward.
Thank you so much for having me. It was a pleasure talking with you.